Hey y'all, how are you doing? I am still here in my makeshift office. So if you can bear with me next week, I should be in my office, and we will be doing regular shows at least Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday here on my YouTube channel, Trish Causey Official. And so welcome to my channel. I am Trish Causey, and I am many things, but especially an artist alchemist, aroused woman, sacred sex shaman, bohemian polymath. I do a lot of different things, and most of them I do well. Some of them I'm, like terrible, like cleaning my house. It's not something I like to do. All right, so this show is this is Foreskin Q&A. And the questions that I got ahead of time were from either adult circumcised men or adult intact men, and they tended to be of a sexual nature. So what I have done is in about half an hour, I'm going to do a show on foreskin sex Q&A. So if you are coming here looking for answers about sex, tune into that show in about half an hour right here on my channel. This foreskin Q&A is more geared toward parents, toward moms to be, especially moms who are expecting boys, to give birth to boys. And we want to give them all sorts of great reasons to keep the foreskin on their baby boys. And then the other thing is, women or men who are interested in a partner, a man who has his foreskin, but they really aren't sure what foreskin is. So that's what we're doing here tonight. This foreskin Q&A is talking about the basics of foreskin, and then in about half an hour we'll jump on over and do the next live show, which is foreskin sex questions and answers. Okay, all right, so this chat is open, so please ask your questions, leave your comments here if you would like to do that, and I'm going to go ahead and get started on foreskin. So the word foreskin is a direct translation of the term prepuce, which comes directly from the Latin prepuzia. And pre means before, and puzia is a term for skin. So literally prepuzia, prepuce literally means before skin, but we call it foreskin. So even call this foreskin, how does that even figure into the male anatomy? Well, unfortunately, they split the male anatomy of the penis from the true part of the penis, which is the shaft, and then the head of the penis, which is the glans penis, and then the skin covering that then is foreskin. It is the skin that comes before the true skin of the shaft. Now, this is ridiculous because if you've ever seen an intact penis, you know that the skin is all connected. And in fact, half of the foreskin, the external part of the foreskin, is the same skin as the rest of the shaft. It is not different. The way that the foreskin then becomes different is on the internal foreskin, between the mucocutaneous junctional erogenous zone, which is that transition from the external foreskin to the internal foreskin. Then you get into some of the good stuff that's all inside, but the external foreskin looks just like the rest of the skin of the penis because it is just like the rest of the skin of the penis. Now, with the foreskin, there is such amazing innervation and blood vessels and just jobs. The foreskin has many jobs, that is functions. And function is basically physiology. It's the study of the function of why these physical parts do what they do. And when you talk about anatomy and physiology, anatomy is the bits and pieces, the pieces and parts of the body. And actually the more correct term is morphology and physiology. Morphology being the study of the form. And so function being the study of function, being the physiology, it really is important to study the form and the function of the foreskin, because when boys or girls are circumcised of their foreskin, their prepuce, you are absolutely destroying the natural form and function as it was designed to be, to protect the genitals, to protect the urinary tract, to increase sexual pleasure when the person is older. The foreskin has many, many, many functions. And I saw that. Hey, Robbie. So let's talk a little bit about the bits and pieces, the anatomy of the foreskin. So again, the outside, the external foreskin is going, hey, how are you? Food boy 90. Ooh, that's a guy after my own heart. And so the foreskin is, it's basically, if you think of this as the glands, which I know this is not a good accurate representation. Let me do like this. Okay. The foreskin is like attached here at the, on the shaft, and then it rolls up on itself. Okay, so you have this external foreskin, this mucocutaneous junctional erogenous zone, which is the demarcation between the external foreskin and the internal foreskin. And then the internal foreskin is connected down here on the shaft. So it's well below the glands, the coronal edge, that's the little bump, the helmet edge around the edge of the head or the glands of the penis. And then that little indentation is called the sulcus. That's that little, the little space in between the head of the penis and the neck of the penis. Well, that's it. That little part of the shaft right under the coronal edge is called the neck of the penis. And then actually from there, it's called the shoulders of the penis. And then you have the body of the penis. So the foreskin is absolutely a part of the penis structure, and it is fused to the glands on purpose when the baby is born. We're talking about baby boys right now, okay? So when I say baby, I'm talking about a baby boy. Or an intersex child, where the child is born with what looks to be a penis and has foreskin, etc. So that applies as well to intersex children. Intersex being the modern term for what used to be called hermaphrodite. Okay, so when you have a baby boy, you give birth to a baby boy, the foreskin is fused to the glands on purpose, the same way that your fingernail is fused to your finger. And it's fused the same way by a tissue called synechia. Okay, so you can imagine if you've ever caught your fingernail on something and it ripped your fingernail back, you know how painful that is? Well, imagine being a baby boy and someone ripping your foreskin off, except they're not just ripping it off. They jab scalpels and forceps. It's a crush. They crush it on purpose, but they crush the foreskin as well as they're jabbing it in there. So you can imagine how painful that is. And before you start talking about, oh, well, they give medication. No, they don't a lot of times. And even when they do, it's proven that most of the time. So one of the things we can talk about next is the foreskin is fused to the glands on purpose. So we don't make, and to pull it back really hurts. And pulling the foreskin back when it's still attached to the gland is called retraction. And I'm here to tell you right now, never, ever, ever retract a boy's foreskin, ever. Never. No one is allowed to pull a boy's foreskin back. And that means you, the parent, that means the doctor or the nurse or the daycare giver or the babysitter, the well-meaning family member when they're changing the diaper because they've never changed an intact boy before. Never, ever, ever retract the foreskin on a baby or a child because the foreskin is still attached on purpose. The foreskin will start to separate as young as 2 or 3, but it may not even start separating from the glands until the guy is 18, 19, or even older. It depends on the boy. It depends on the male, his anatomy, his body, his choice to do what he wants with his penis. So let me just put this really bluntly. The only person who has a right to manipulate the foreskin on a child's penis is the child himself. And yeah, boys are going to play with their penis. It's hanging outside their body. It looks cool to play with. It's fun to play with for them. They can play with their own penis. Adults, I'm sorry to tell you this. You really shouldn't be playing with children's penises. Okay? All right. So foreskin is a very, very complicated anatomical structure, which is why it is so shocking to me that the foreskin is not covered in medical textbooks in medical schools. It's not covered in the nursing textbooks in nursing schools. This still just blows my mind that a person can go through, 7 years of medical school, become a doctor, go into some specialty, and they've never actually learned about the whole anatomy of the male body. The foreskin isn't even drawn on the anatomical illustrations in the medical textbooks. The foreskin is designed onto the anatomical models that are plastic models that are used in sex ed classes in high schools. And one of the things that I find so crazy is that I've been told that these anatomical models, these plastic models that are used even in England and overseas in Europe, European sex ed classes, they don't have the foreskin because the schools buy these anatomical plastic models from American companies. So the foreskin just isn't there. So we don't see it in sex ed in high school. The doctors in training and nurses in training don't see the foreskin listed, drawn, labeled, or described at all in their medical or nursing textbooks. In fact, the only time they actually talk about foreskin is when they get to their OBGYN rotation and they're taught how to cut it off. But they're not told and they're not taught what foreskin is, why it's there, why all males of all 5,416 species of mammals are born with a protective covering on the tip of their penis, and then they're not told how it functions. And most importantly, how the function of the foreskin changes from childhood to adulthood. That one little piece of skin grows up to be a much larger piece of skin that has so many functions for protection, protecting from urinary tract infections, protecting from other kinds of bacterial infections. In fact, the foreskin itself, as on newborns, it creates a certain kind of cell, the Langerhans cells, and they actually kill HIV. And so as you get older, men, your foreskin function changes. In fact, the way the foreskin functions for sex is really incredible. And we'll talk more about that in the next show, which is in about 15 minutes. But one of the things that I think is really important for men to understand, what I think is really important for parents to understand, is that you're not thinking of your newborn baby or the baby you're pregnant with. You're not thinking of them as an adult. You're thinking about this new little baby that you're going to love and you're going to hold and you're going to change his stinky diapers. And, you're going to watch all those, the first teeth and the first steps and the first this and the first that. And you're not thinking of how he's going to be a man one day, right? You're not thinking about that, but it's really important that you do. If for no other reason than the fact that the foreskin is truly important and integral to sexual satisfaction for the adult man, or for the teenager, if he's sexually active or even just masturbating, which is totally normal. So I hope you're okay with that. That's masturbation is normal. It's healthy on a lot of levels. And yes, boys are going to play with their penis from the time they're 3 or 4 years old. They're definitely playing with it by the time they're 13, 14, 15. And so as they get older and they actually start having sex, they definitely need the foreskin on their penis. And one of the statistics that a lot of people don't know is that over 60% of erectile dysfunction in this country is directly attributable to the fact that the man was circumcised as a baby. And one of the reasons that is because it is in fact the foreskin that triggers the release of ejaculate fluid from the prostate. The foreskin is connected to the prostate. So when you lose that foreskin as a child, you're actually not functioning technically properly your entire adult life, because you don't have your entire sexual anatomy. The most highly innervated part of your body, guys, is in your foreskin, between the ridged band and the frenulum. And the frenulum is actually what holds the foreskin to the top of the glands. That little triangular delta of the frenulum is absolutely one of the most or the most innervated parts of your body. And I don't know, men give me different bits of information about which is more sensitive, the ridge band or the frenulum. That's why I can't say which is more sexually sensitive. But what I can say is that no matter how good sex has ever been for a man who is circumcised and who was cut as a child, he has no idea. And he has no idea what he's missing. He has no idea. Like, whatever you have ever experienced as the best sex, the best feelings, you don't even know. And that is so sad. For me as a sex coach, for me as someone who is an advocate for body autonomy, for me as someone as a woman who had painful sex with circumcised men, I don't like sex with circumcised men. And so, you know, it's like, to get into the sex side of things and how the sex is different. We will talk more about that in the next show in about 10 minutes. But very quickly, for women who have only experienced painful sex or just not fulfilling sex, I see a correlation between the rate of circumcision in this country, which for adult men is still around 77 to 78%. I've seen as high as 80% for adult men. So 77 to 80% of the men, adult men in this country, are circumcised, and 75% of women have never orgasmed during penetrative sex. I see a correlation between the two. And then when you talk about women's experiences of how sex is painful, or when sex, because they dry out, and so the onus of making sex pleasurable and keeping it all wet, it falls onto the woman. Now, again, this is more for the sex side of the sex Q&A, which we'll do in a minute. But very quickly, for any woman who's watching this show because she wants to know a little bit more about foreskin and what to do with it and how to play with it, well, let me just tell you, with circumcised men, and this is not to shame circumcised men, I'm just giving you information, okay? All right. Hey, Marcello. I'm sorry. Marcilio. I'm sorry. I can barely read this. And yeah, I think I saw DJ and Robbie. But what happens is that, remember we were talking a minute ago about the coronal edge, that little helmet edge of the glands. Well, what happens is that because of that coronal edge that dips in at the sulcus, at the neck of the penis, and then the shoulders of the penis. Well, that coronal edge on circumcised men actually acts like a squeegee, and it literally pulls all the moisture created by the vagina, it pulls it out. So every time the guy comes in and he thrusts in, he withdraws, he's just literally scraping the vaginal fluid right out of the vagina. Now, the vagina creates most of the vaginal fluid for sex. Heterosexual sex, we're talking about that for just a minute. For anal sex, you really want to use a lube almost all the time. I've only known one person who ever said that he did not need lube for anal sex. Most everybody else, you want to use some lube back there. And if y'all want me to do a show on anal sex, please let me know. I will be happy to, because I think anal sex is wonderful and it is perfectly normal, but that is another show. So we've got about 10 minutes left in this show. So if you have any questions, go ahead and list them for me right now. And so briefly, I want to talk about smegma and phimosis. Now, the reason why I'm talking about them together is because I find that people have issues with both smegma and phimosis for the same reason. Both smegma and phimosis are terms that are used for natural phenomenon with the foreskin, and then also medical diagnosis, something's wrong. And so I think a lot of people get confused. So smegma is a term that is used to label this clear fluid that is naturally produced by the internal foreskin. And the smegma is there to create natural lube so the foreskin can glide up and over the glands as it needs to. Believe it or not, the glands is actually changing its shape and changing its location depending on, is the guy sitting, is he standing, is he walking, is he running? So actually the foreskin's like constantly moving. You may not really notice it, or it may not be as noticeable as when you're masturbating or manipulating your foreskin. Again, adults only. No one touches the child's penis and retracts the foreskin. We don't want that. But the smegma is normal, and the internal foreskin creates a lot of good, healthy fauna and flora to keep the internal foreskin and the glands healthy. The same way the vagina creates fauna and flora to keep women healthy. And so the pH is important. The fauna and flora, keeping that healthy is important. And if there is any kind of buildup, just know that that means that the foreskin is working. If you see like any noticeable like little white pieces around the edge of the head or the tip of the glands, just know that that means that the foreskin is working. It's doing its job as a self-cleaning organ. It's pushing any kind of debris outward to get it away from the deeper parts of the glands, particularly that underside, that sulcus area, you know? And so smegma is said to be, you know, what's cock brie, dick cheese. I've heard some awful terms for smegma, but just know that clear smegma is normal, and the man's body is producing that all the time. Okay, it's when that dick cheese, that really foul dick cheese. Well, that's not actually smegma. That's actually bacteria. So you have smegma that's clear and normal, and both of these smegma, that's like saying this is an apple and this is an orange, but we're going to call this orange an apple anyway. It does not make sense to have the same term for both the clear, normal, natural fluid that is needed by the penis to stay healthy and to keep that movement of the glands and the foreskin so that it's smooth and comfortable. If that makes smegma, that clear natural fluid, it would be painful for the foreskin to glide back and forth over the glands. You'll notice, if you've ever seen, and you can go to my blog and see the intact blog post in pictorials that I've done, that the look of an intact penis, an intact head, is completely different than circumcised. Intact men, the glands, the head is so shiny, it's so smooth, and just touching it, it's velvety, soft and smooth. It's like there is a firm core in there, but just touching it itself, it's just soft and bouncy. It's amazing and a lot of fun. I highly recommend you try that out sometime. And what you see with circumcised men is that the glands is often dry, it's cracked, and the circumcised men tend to have their meatus lips worn away. A lot of American men don't realize that they actually should have lips at the end of their penis. On either side of the urethral opening, you should have lips. It's called a meatus or meatus. Americans mispronounce that. It's Latin. But you actually have little lips protruding right there at the urethral opening, the same way for the same reason that women have lips, is because you're going from, an external part of the body to the internal part of the body. And by external, I mean the penis. Here's a little trick, some trivia, but the glands of the penis is an internal organ. That's why, regardless of the man's skin tone, the glands of the penis is going to be some shade of pink to purple. It may be a really pale pink. It may be a kind of chocolatey purple or some beautiful shade in between. But the glands, the neck of the penis, and the shoulders of the penis are internal organs, and they are designed to be covered, protected by the foreskin. So quickly about phimosis. A lot of men contact me afraid that they have phimosis. Well, phimosis in babies is normal, and phimosis is a Greek word, and it means muzzle. And the reason why it's called that is because on a newborn baby, the foreskin does look kind of muzzled to the penis because it's fused to the glands and the penis on purpose. Now, phimosis, unfortunately, is also used as a medical diagnosis when a man's foreskin has gotten so tight that it will not retract, it will not move backwards, it will not slide over the glands, or if it does, it slides back and tucks up underneath the corona, gets stuck up into the sulcus, and then it can't move, and that's called paraphimosis. So phimosis means muzzle, but it's normal, and that's exactly the way it should be on babies, because the foreskin is connected to the glands via the synechia, right? Remember, the same way our fingernails are connected to our finger. Process for the boy is that the synechia starts to loosen or starts to dissolve, and that's when the boy notices that the foreskin starts to retract. I hate using that word, but that's the word. The foreskin starts to glide backward a little bit, and then over time, it's able to, for most men, it's able to glide all the way back. And the synechia, on a lot of men, the foreskin is held on by one little piece of that synechia, and oftentimes he'll have to just give it a good tug, and it pops that last piece of synechia, and then the man is fully retractable. But again, for phimosis and men with tight foreskin, that phimosis or that tight foreskin is normal in babies. It's not as normal for teens, or really their foreskin is just still connected to their glands. It just hasn't fully separated yet. They still have synechia tissue holding it on. And how do you get rid of it? Well, as long as it's not painful, the guy can play with it. It'll move on its own. And then for adult men who think they have phimosis, really and truly, it's not phimosis. It's just a tight foreskin, and you can learn those stretch the foreskin. I'm actually doing a foreskin study with phimosis. So if you're interested, if you're intact and you think you have phimosis or just even a really tight foreskin, and you'd like to be a part of my study, please let me know. But yeah, I get really annoyed that phimosis is both the term for the physiological normal foreskin of a baby, but then it's used as the medical diagnosis of a pathological problem in teens and adult men. So, okay, wow, we're at 30 minutes right now. So I hope this was informative. And if you would like me to do more shows like this, please let me know. And I will be very happy to do more shows on foreskin, about the anatomy and the function, how it changes from when you're a baby through teenagedom up to adulthood, and we can absolutely do. Now, if you're really interested in all the good juicy parts of what the foreskin is good for, go ahead and join me in just a second. I'll need to end this and start the other show, but hang tight here on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Trish Causey official, and we will talk about foreskin sex Q&A, because I saw y'all in the chat room. I know y'all want to talk about the sex side of things. And as a woman, I can tell you, there's nothing like intact sex. I love it. And I can only highly recommend it. So, all right, let's jump on over to the foreskin sex Q&A, and I will be happy to take your questions. I love you. Remember, only love is real, and I will see you in just a minute.